program is The Active Center. It's created by David Sappe.
Pronounced Seppi.
So here's a question for you. What could possibly connect a Johnny Cash ballad from the 1950s to a fatal incident in the near future? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a pretty powerful analysis that links them through a single tragic American theme.
It seems like an impossible question, right? You've got a classic Johnny Cash song. I mean, that's pure American folklore. And then you have a real-life fatal confrontation that happens almost 70 years later. But the analysis we're exploring today, it draws this haunting and incredibly direct line right between them.
To really get our heads around that connection, we have to start by looking at two tragic stories that kind of run in parallel. The first is about a fictional cowboy from a long-gone era, and the second, a real activist from our own near future.
So on the left, you've got Billy Joe from the Johnny Cash song. He's a young cowboy who walks into a saloon with his guns, trying to prove himself. Then on the right, we meet Renee Nicole Good, a mother of three who confronts federal ICE agents right on a Minneapolis street. I mean, at first glance, they couldn't be more different. But they both chose a path of confrontation. The core of the song, and honestly the core of this entire comparison, it all comes down to this one single warning. A mother's simple plea to her son that becomes a chilling prophecy. This line right here, it's the key that unlocks the connection between both tragedies. And that warning, and the decision to just ignore it, that's our first huge parallel. You see, in both stories, the tragic outcome is set up by a clear caution. A warning against bringing a weapon, whether it's literal or metaphorical, into a really volatile situation.
And wow, this slide just lays it out so perfectly. For Billy Joe, the warning is super direct, it's personal. It comes from his mom. For Renee Good, the warning was public, it was political. It came from city and state leaders who were out there saying these federal blitz operations were absolutely going to lead to violence. One warning was whispered at home, the other was declared in press conferences. And both were ignored.
Okay, now this is the crucial metaphor that really connects everything. In the 2026 incident, taking your guns to town wasn't about an actual firearm. The analysis we're looking at suggests the gun was the vehicle itself, a 2-ton SUV used as a tool to obstruct. It's about bringing any powerful means of confrontation into a high-stakes arena.
So all of this brings us to the climax in both stories, that moment of confrontation, the fatal quick draw. And this is where the clash of perceptions becomes, quite literally, a matter of life and death.
Just look at the parallels here. The arena, okay, it shifts from a dusty saloon to a modern city street. But the draw, that critical, aggressive action, it's no longer reaching for a Colt 45. It's maneuvering a Honda Pilot. The tech and the setting have changed, sure, but this analysis argues that the lethal dynamic is exactly the same.
And here is another just haunting parallel, the fatal mismatch between the people involved. In both cases, you have an amateur confronting a professional. Billy Joe, just a boy who meant no harm, going up against a seasoned gunfighter. Renee Good, a civilian mom, up against a 10-year veteran of an ICE special response team. The outcomes, well, in both cases, they were tragically predictable.
So you have to ask, what drove them to do it? For Billy Joe, as you can see, it was pride, a young man's need to prove himself. For Renee Good, the analysis suggests a very modern parallel, a powerful moral imperative, this righteous belief that she had to challenge what she saw as unjust authority. But whether they were driven by pride or by principle, the result was the same. They provoked a force that was far more lethally efficient than they were.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together to understand the final echo, what this analysis calls the tragedy of the outdrawn.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the tragedy. It's not about trying to find villains. It's about two people or two sides standing in the exact same space, but living in completely different realities.
The individual, whether it's Billy Joe or Renee Good, they see themselves as acting on principle. They're defending their dignity, or they're fighting for a just cause. But the other person, the dusty cowpoke or the federal agent, is operating from a totally different rulebook. They don't see a moral debate. They are identifying a threat that, according to their experience and their training, requires a decisive and often lethal response.
And this brings us right back to the song's heartbreaking ending. Billy Joe dies, repeating the very warning his mother gave him. The crowd hears his words, but they can't understand the meaning. It's a lesson learned at the highest possible cost,
a wisdom that only shows up when it's already too late.
And this is the powerful conclusion from our source material. Whether the weapon is a pistol or a vehicle, whether the arena is a saloon or a street, this narrative of the individual who challenges an armed and authorized power and loses, it's a story that just seems to repeat itself throughout American history.
So it leaves us with a final haunting question. When principle clashes with power, and a citizen decides to draw a line in the sand against an armed and authorized state, what is the true cost? It's a question that echoes from a 1958 ballad all the way to today, and probably far beyond. Thanks for joining me for this one.